Chosen one. Subscribe and let the awakening compass guide you. What if I told you that your enemy's fate has already been sealed and no amount of pleading can save them now? Enough is enough. The patience of divine grace, though immeasurable in depth, is not without boundaries. When enemies of the chosen persist in their defiance, disregarding mercy and mocking the sacred, their fate becomes irrevocably sealed. This is not the impulse of wrath, but the deliberate stroke of divine justice, one that reaffirms the sanctity of God's order. Each act of defiance weighs heavily on the scales of judgment, and when the balance tips, there is no turning back. Imagine a cosmic courtroom where every action, word, and motive is laid bare. The enemies, so blinded by pride and defiance, believed themselves untouchable. But divine sovereignty operates beyond their understanding. Their sealed fate is not a random decree. It is the inevitable consequence of rejecting grace and refusing the call to repentance. In this finality, God's mercy transitions into judgment, ensuring that His justice prevails and divine order is restored. The chosen, watching from the sidelines, often question why such defiance is allowed to linger. Yet, God's timing is perfect, His plans inscrutable. The persistence of their enemies only sharpens their spiritual resilience, forging a deeper connection to their divine purpose. As the moment of reckoning approaches, the silence of divine action speaks louder than any thunderous proclamation, setting the stage for the unfolding of sealed fates. Their fate is sealed. Like the ancient king's signet pressing into wax, God's judgment leaves an irreversible imprint on the destiny of those who defy His divine will. Pleas and protests fall into an abyss of silence, for the line has been crossed. This is not cruelty, but the certainty of cosmic justice, where the stubbornness of the heart meets its undeniable consequence. In this, God's sovereignty stands unchallenged. Think of a mighty fortress with its gates shut tight, impenetrable to any force. The enemies of the chosen, having spurned grace and mercy, now find themselves locked outside this fortress of redemption. No amount of strength or cunning can breach what has been divinely decreed. Their rejection of grace was not momentary but deliberate, a defiance that solidified over time until the decree was written in eternity. And yet, this sealing is not the end. It is a turning point in God's plan. While the enemies are left to reap the harvest of their rebellion, the chosen are reminded of the gravity of divine justice. This irrevocable verdict serves as a reminder to all who observe it. God's decrees are neither arbitrary nor cruel, but deeply rooted in His divine purpose. It also foreshadows the greater justice yet to come. This is justice, not vengeance. When the fate of the enemies is sealed, it is not a display of wrath, but a restoration of divine order. Their actions have disrupted the balance, mocked grace, and defied God's plan. Justice steps in to correct what defiance has corrupted, to ensure that accountability prevails. It is not revenge. It is the righteous consequence of deliberate rebellion against divine laws. Picture a meticulous judge weighing every word and deed with precision. The enemy's punishment is not arbitrary. It is the result of their persistent refusal to heed warnings, embrace humility, or seek repentance. Justice is not fueled by emotion, but by principle. Every decision is measured and righteous, emphasizing that God's purpose is always about restoration, never destruction for destruction's sake. Through this divine act of justice, moral lessons echo across the lives of the chosen and beyond. The fall of the defiant serves as a solemn reminder of accountability, a warning that no one can escape the consequences of defiance. Yet, even in judgment, there is a glimmer of divine purpose, an opportunity for the chosen to witness the power of grace that they themselves have embraced, contrasted starkly with the downfall of those who rejected it. Their failure was inevitable. Opposition to the chosen is not merely a clash of wills, but a futile battle against the unstoppable force of God's purpose. Every move made against the chosen is a move against divine sovereignty, an act doomed from the start. This is not the triumph of human strength, but the revelation of a plan so intricate that no defiance can unravel it. The enemy's defeat was written before the battle began. Consider the futility of one standing against a raging storm, believing their defiance can change its course. The enemies, blinded by pride, underestimated the power behind the chosen. What they perceived as victory was only their role in a grander design, serving to refine the chosen and fulfill God's plan. Their downfall is not a testament to their weakness, but to the unshakable strength of divine order. Yet, even their failure serves a divine purpose. In their defiance, they become instruments of spiritual growth for the chosen, testing their faith and resilience. As the enemies falter, the chosen ascend, their elevation underscoring the wisdom and justice of God's plan. This divine orchestration leaves no room for doubt. Every triumph of the chosen is a direct reflection of God's cosmic justice. God's actions speak louder in their silence. Without fanfare or spectacle, he demonstrates his unmatched authority, leaving no doubt about his sovereignty. The downfall of the enemies unfolds with quiet inevitability, their fates sealed not through dramatic displays, but through the subtle, unshakable execution of divine will. In this silence lies the weight of cosmic justice, unerring and absolute. Imagine the stillness before a storm, where every leaf and blade of grass seems to hold its breath. This is the quiet resolve of divine action, powerful yet restrained, deliberate but unrelenting. The enemies, deceived by the lack of immediate retribution, mistake silence for weakness. But this silence is their undoing, a reminder that God's timing is precise and his justice inescapable. The quiet arrival of judgment carries more finality than the loudest thunder. This silence humbles the chosen, reminding them of the intricate layers of God's plan. It teaches them to trust in his unseen warfare, to recognize that battles are won not by noise but by divine strategy. In the stillness, the chosen grow in faith, realizing that even when God appears silent, his purposes are advancing. And as judgment is delivered, the magnitude of his sovereignty becomes undeniable. The verdict is final. When God renders judgment, it is not a decision to be debated or revised. Every thought, action, and intent of the enemies has been weighed, and their continuous defiance has sealed their destiny. This is not the product of haste, but the culmination of their rejection of grace. The eternal nature of God's justice ensures that no appeal can overturn what has been decreed. Visualize an unyielding mountain, its peaks carved over millennia, impervious to the winds that howl against it. God's judgment is just as unmovable. The enemy's pride and defiance, like the wind, cannot alter the eternal truth of his decrees. Their rejection of mercy was a deliberate choice, and their sealed fate reflects the undeniable consequences of that decision. This is justice in its purest form, untainted by sentimentality or doubt. For the chosen, this verdict serves as both a warning and a revelation. It underscores the gravity of divine accountability, reminding them of the sacred responsibility they carry. As the enemies meet their downfall, the chosen are compelled to reflect on the gift of grace they have received and the divine purpose they are called to fulfill. The story does not end here. Instead, it prepares the way for the roles yet to be revealed. The enemies, though defiant, unknowingly served a purpose. Their opposition acted as a forge, refining the chosen in the fires of adversity. Every act of hostility was transformed into a lesson, every attack into an opportunity for spiritual growth. In their rebellion, they became unwitting instruments of God's plan, their defiance sharpening the resilience and faith of the chosen. Picture a blacksmith hammering raw metal, each strike shaping it into something stronger and more resilient. The enemy's actions, though intended for harm, mirrored those blows. Yet, instead of destruction, they tempered the chosen, preparing them for the roles God had ordained. These enemies, blind to their divine function, fulfilled a purpose greater than they could comprehend, serving as stepping stones for the elevation of the chosen. But their role was never meant to be eternal. Once their purpose was fulfilled, their presence became unnecessary, their power extinguished. This cycle reinforces the wisdom of God's plan, using what seems like opposition to accomplish His will. The chosen rise from these trials not only victorious, but more deeply aligned with their divine purpose, ready to step into the next chapter of God's unfolding story. Grace is not unconditional. It demands humility and repentance. God's mercy is vast, but it does not extend to those who persist in pride and defiance. The enemies of the chosen shut the door to redemption themselves, choosing rebellion over reconciliation. Grace was offered, but it was not embraced. In their rejection, they cemented their own downfall, a fate both tragic and just. Consider a cup overflowing with water, available to quench the thirst of anyone willing to drink. Yet, the enemies turned away, scorning the life-giving gift. Their pride became a barrier, their hearts hardened against the call to repentance. Grace, though abundant, requires a response. Without it, even the most generous offer remains unclaimed. The enemy's refusal left them stranded, cut off from the redemption they desperately needed but refused to seek. This conditional grace serves as a solemn reminder for the chosen. It is a testament to the balance between divine justice and mercy. Grace is a gift, but it carries a responsibility, a call to transformation and humility. As the chosen reflect on this truth, they are reminded of the privilege of their position and the weight of accountability that comes with it. The stage is set for the warning their story will now proclaim. The downfall of the enemies serves as a resounding warning. It is a declaration that defying divine will lead to inevitable consequences. Their rebellion against God's order and rejection of grace became their undoing, a vivid demonstration of the unshakable power of divine justice. The chosen witness this outcome not with glee but with solemn understanding, knowing it serves a purpose beyond themselves. Imagine a lighthouse standing tall, its light cutting through the darkness to warn ships of perilous rocks ahead. The fate of the enemies is this warning, a beacon for those who might tread the same path of defiance. Their story is not merely one of punishment but of instruction, urging others to consider their choices and embrace the grace still available to them. To ignore this lesson is to invite the same spiritual checkmate. For the chosen, the warning is clear. Divine justice is not a distant threat but an active reality. It underscores the importance of walking in humility and remaining aligned with God's purpose. As they rise, they do so with the weight of this warning etched into their hearts, ready to carry its message forward. The tale of consequences sets the stage for the unfolding role reversal that God has ordained. The warning echoes beyond the enemies of the chosen. It is a call to every soul walking the line between humility and rebellion. To witness such a fall is to understand the weight of rejecting grace, a fate not reserved for the few but for any who defy God's divine order. This is not a mere tale of punishment. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting the consequences of pride. Those who hear and heed this warning find themselves safeguarded by grace, while those who ignore it risk the same inevitable downfall. The tables have turned. The chosen, once oppressed and overlooked, now stand in the light of divine favor. Their enemies, who reveled in defiance and mockery, have descended into the consequences of their rebellion. This role reversal is not accidental. It is the deliberate unfolding of God's plan, a demonstration of His justice and sovereignty. The elevation of the chosen is a testament to divine purpose fulfilled. Picture a stage where the actors suddenly switch roles, the persecuted becoming the triumphant and the oppressors fading into obscurity. This is the divine role reversal, a display of cosmic justice that highlights the brilliance of God's strategy. The enemies, once so confident in their pride, now experience the weight of their rejection, while the chosen rise with humility, strengthened by their trials and aligned with God's will. This reversal is not merely for the chosen's benefit, it is a lesson for all. It reveals the immutable order of God's justice, where the humble are exalted and the proud are brought low. As the chosen embrace their new position, they do so with the knowledge that their elevation is not of their own doing but a fulfillment of God's design. The story moves forward, a vivid reminder that divine justice is both inevitable and perfect. It serves as a living testament that God's sovereignty cannot be undermined and His justice cannot be delayed. The chosen, now walking in divine elevation, stand as evidence of God's unwavering promise to uplift those who remain faithful. Meanwhile, the enemies, now reduced to shadows of their former selves, become symbols of the dangers of defiance. This is not just a story of justice, it is a glimpse into the ultimate triumph of God's eternal plan. The time for action is now. You've witnessed how divine justice unfolds, how pride leads to downfall, and how the chosen are elevated by God's plan. But what about you? Are you standing in alignment with divine purpose, or are you wavering in the face of life's unseen warfare? This is your chance to reflect and take ownership of your spiritual journey. Will you embrace grace and humility, or risk the consequences of defiance? Think about the lessons shared here. What changes will you make to ensure you're on the right side of God's justice? Will you cultivate spiritual resilience, let go of pride, and step into your divine calling? Or will you remain passive, watching opportunities slip away? These are questions only you can answer, and the time to decide is now. If this resonated with you, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you won't miss more insights on God's plan, justice, and spiritual growth. Together, let's navigate these divine truths and keep growing in faith and purpose. The journey is far from over, and there's so much more to uncover.